live from the UCB Theater in New York City. It's 7-second delay. Everybody clap.
First, we want to thank everybody for making the WFMU Marathon such a success. Everybody clap. As a byproduct of the successful marathon, we are strapping Andy Breckman to a cross tonight.
So I agreed to be crucified, and then after the show, I said to Ken, so now we have to get someone to build a cross? And Ken said, oh no, we have one. What kind of radio station has a cross hanging? What have you just been waiting for this moment, or?
It's covered with vinyl.
So let's get this over with. Now, what happens if I have to scratch my nose, or my testicles get dry? Things happen in the course of a show.
That's the whole idea of crucifixion. You can't deal with those problems.
That's the whole idea of crucifixion. What a great way to meet They Might Be Giants. Are you a religious man?
Becoming one. Watching.
Yeah. Great to meet you. Great to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you too.
You know how important first impressions are.
This is a dream come true for me, Andy, because this is the only time in your 25 years of doing radio that you've had good microphone technique.
So Andy's kind of got the jazz musician mic thing, sort of. I'm playing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, big time.
Yeah.
I've only been doing it 20 years, so I'm still learning. I'm a work in progress.
So one thing I wanted to ask you guys
God's
about...
not done with you yet.
God is very close to being done with me.
They Might Be Giants kind of... you kind of foretold the internet with the Dial-A-Song project.
People say that, but I sort of feel like I think it was sort of different. I think part of the thing that is hard to remember is how pitiful it seemed at the time.
So how many songs did you put out as Dial-A-Song?
All
hundreds,
of them, basically.
Hundreds,
Everything we ever, for a long period of time, that was the clearinghouse for every song that we wrote, including ones that never went anywhere else.
Yeah.
Your fans are pretty rabid.
Yeah.
Well, they're also very good. They're very completist and they'd be good librarians.
Why is that? Why have you attracted fans like that?
Well, I think it's a sort of Asperger's thing, a little bit. I'm all for it.
What's the longest you've ever gone without writing a song? Do you guys really? Can you
I think
really
the first 18 years of my life.
And it's just that we've literally been doing this for 30
You're known
years.
as being one of the most prolific songwriting teams.
No, I think Guided by Voices has us down, and that's just one guy and a giant pot of coffee and a bong.
Yeah. What's the worst Beatles song?
Oh, everybody says "Till They Were You," "Till There Was You."
Worst Beatles song.
They're the
Worst
Beatles.
Beatles
The Beatles are
Might
the
I
Beatles.
suggest "Obla Di Obla Da"?
That's a wonderful song.
See, this brings up the whole problem with worst. It's a complicated topic. Because if it's that bad that it gets your attention, it's got some juice. The really bad song,
you're absolutely
you can't
right.
even remember.
Right. It's forgettable. You're not even thinking
Right.
about it. Yeah. They didn't
Twist
write
and
that.
Shout's a great song.
Twist and Shout's
Yeah,
a
and they
great-
didn't write that anyway.
Well, it's a great performance.
La Bamba's
for sure.
a great song.
We have a heckler shouting out the names of great songs.
Right.
Welcome, everyone, to all the uninitiated. Welcome to WFMU.
Just found this out a couple of days ago that you guys apparently went to high school with one of our DJs.
We did, in fact.
Evan Funk Davies.
That's
Yes.
correct.
So tell us something really embarrassing about Evan Funk
Well,
Davies.
I don't know if
But also, Evan's original nickname was Hunk Davies. Evan Hunk Davies, given to him by a girl in our clique. It was a bunch of boys and the girls who refused to date them. And
The way to segue into our next guest, you know Susan Orlean and have been interviewed by her.
That's correct.
we
Yep,
have been
yep.
interviewed by
We
Sue
do.
Orlean.
She was actually a drummer for us for early
No, I think
on.
you're confusing.
We still have her
confusing people now.
timbales.
That's right. She left all the cymbals.
I believe her nickname also was Hunk. Now, what was some? Do you remember any questions she asked you? Or the high point
I
of
just
that
remember I
interview?
gave some snarky answer mentioning cocaine and touched my nose at a certain moment because it actually genuinely itched.
Oh,
And
it
people
freaked out the audience.
They
It was
thought
like I was making like sort of a cavalier drug reference, and I was like, the coke, and it was like it was chilling. It chilled people because I had probably pounded back like 2 large cups of coffee right before the interview and appeared as if I was on cocaine. So it was terrible.
This is horrible. Now you couldn't see them because I was at a better angle, but they both had very round heads. I think they might both have been cesarean born.
Uh-huh. You want to bring them
what I
back
can
out here and
contribute.
ask them?
No, it's an interesting. Well, the internet will settle all this.
Yeah. You're always obsessed.
Famous musicians, cesarean born.
Yeah, you're always
Just
obsessed
Google
with
it.
whether people are cesarean or vaginally born.
I'm a curious person.
Yeah. There's something else behind that.
I like to think about vaginas.
And how about you?
And I'm a curious person.
Were you cesarean?
I'm gonna hold that off to the very end of the show. That'll keep people tuned in.
Please welcome Susan Orlean. Hi, Susan.
Don't even look at me.
Thank you so much for coming and being a part of this.
I'm very embarrassed.
I've never. Is this an Easter thing?
It's actually tonight. I'm told is Purim. I'm reminded, which makes this.
Is it Purim?
Yeah.
Oh,
Which
that makes it
this
even more offensive.
even
doesn't
more
it?
offensive.
Yeah.
You know what's funny? I'm doing the show from a high elevation, but as a show, we've never sunk lower. Isn't that funny? My wife Beth loved your book, and then she handed it to me, and it's on my nightstand. So it's coming up. It's on deck.
What I like is people who will say, I haven't read your book yet, but it looks good.
Now, tell us something about Rin Tin Tin that we don't know. Of course, when we say Rin Tin Tin, your book is sort of an epic. It's actually multiple generations.
Yeah, I mean, to begin with, what I didn't know about Rin Tin Tin was that he was not merely a 1950s television show character. He was a real dog born in World War I on a battlefield in France.
He's the war horse of dog.
It was almost 100 years of a story that went through just about every, change in our culture. I'll tell you one thing that will shock you. He had a radio show.
Really?
He was crucified on the radio show.
Susan, at any other radio station, that would be shocking.
Yeah, no, he did.
It was the Rin Tin Tin Hour?
Yeah, yeah. And they were kind of cops and robbers shows. And at the end, of course, the dog would come in and solve the crime. And what's even more amazing is he occasionally did his own barking. But the guy who did his barking most of the time was named Bob Barker. And, people say to me, why do you write nonfiction? I don't want to say the obvious, but how could you make that up?
And how does a dog become famous?
Well,
were there heroics on the battlefield?
Yeah, no. In the 1920s, he, the young American who found him on the battlefield, brought him back to California after the war, and wrote a screenplay. And dogs were often the stars in silent films. How many of you have seen The Artist? I mean, the thing about of silent films is that dogs can be just as expressive as people when there's no dialogue. So dogs were a huge hit in Hollywood in the 20s.
Yeah. You're actually giving a talk tomorrow night about animals at the Morgan Library, right?
Right. Well, there's a great exhibit at the Morgan Library right now where they've brought out all of their material, illustrations, everything that they've got animal related. And it should be a beautiful show. And I am talking about living with animals and the way that it's changed since, say, the early days of Rin Tin Tin to now. I'm going to start with a caveman. It's going to be really long.
You live on a farm. You have animals. You have chickens.
Yes, I have chickens. I have about 9 chickens, 4 turkeys, 4 guinea fowl, about 5 ducks, 13
Goats?
black Angus. No goats. I don't know why I haven't broken through the goat barrier. I want a goat.
So do I.
I do. I really want a goat.
I want one very badly.
Yeah.
I've been trying to get you 2 kids together for the longest time.
The things you write about are just so fascinating. Can you tell us any of the things that you're planning on writing about in the future?
I'm going to work on a profile of an artist who began doing portraits of people shopping in Walmart. And he's gone through a really interesting sort of battle and then ultimate embrace by the corporate entity of Walmart. But I think there's no limit to the number of stories you can write about Walmart. But I do have a lot of other ideas, and I have a book idea sort of percolating, but I don't even want to say it out loud because I don't want someone to think I'm going to start working on it.
Nobody's listening.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That's our promise to you. Well, you
Go ahead. You can tell us.
All right. Well, just between you and me.
Yeah.
Okay. Pornography.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
The industry?
Yeah. No.
No.
I was just.
Oh, okay.
You know who will love that book?
I was just trying to get
Men.
you to lose your license. Yeah.
Everybody clap for pornography.
Yeah.
Have your fingers lost blood flow yet?
Let's just get this over with.
Yeah.
Stay.
Our first return guest ever. His work has appeared in the New York Times, GQ. He's currently a columnist for ESPN.com. WFMU listeners might remember him as the creator of Beer Frame. Please welcome Paul Lukas.
Very nice to meet you.
Well, you met Andy during our 60-second show.
Yeah, I was part of the 60 interviews in 60 minutes.
Yeah.
It was actually a very interesting. You were talking about sports uniforms and why certain decisions were made. And
Yeah, well, what I remember actually is that I was sort of late in the show, and you were getting cranky. People were coming up one at a time, and you were like, what do you do? And then they would tell you, and you'd say, who booked you? What are you doing here? And then I came up, and they said, what do you do? And I said, well, I write about uniform design. And for some reason, your face lit up, Andy, and you said, oh, you actually do something interesting.
Yeah. What uniform changes have there been recently that that sports fans would find interesting?
Well, baseball season's about to start, and there's a lot of changes, and they're uncharacteristically, they're almost all for the better, I'm happy to say.
Well, just tell us a couple.
Yeah, the Toronto Blue Jays are going back to a sort of modified version of their original look with the Blue Jay head and it's the inline split numbers. The Mets have jettisoned all the black from their uniform.
Oh,
program.
thank God.
Thank God.
Yeah.
True Mets equals Blue Mets. Who nailed it? Most teams in the 60s kind of nailed it because fabrics were really nice then. And even the photography of that era, like uniforms looked better in a magazine because it was all like Kodachrome and stuff like that.
I can't tell. Like if I was watching a football game with you, I can't tell if you'd be the most annoying person to be with or the coolest, most interesting person to be with.
You've resurrected the show and tell format. You've been doing a monthly show and tell show in Brooklyn, right?
Yeah. It was at the City Reliquary, and it's about to move to Cabinet, which is a space in Gowanus, and a week from tomorrow, March 15th. We'll do show and tell there. And it's just like in second grade when everybody did show and tell. The idea is anyone can bring an object of personal significance and talk about it for up to 3 minutes. And the objects can...
And this has taken off. It's really popular.
Yeah, there's a nice following for show and tell. People have brought everything from an electroshock machine that was salvaged from an abandoned mental hospital. One woman marched up to the podium and popped out her false tooth and told a story about it, and then passed it around the room because it's show and tell. Because you want to,
And nobody stole it.
Nobody stole it. No. One woman told a beautiful story about the wedding ring she was wearing. And the ring had been a hand-me-down for like 3 generations, and then the gold for that ring had been mined in Australia by her great-great-uncle or something like that from a gold, so that, the metal for this ring. And so it's just like any kind of storytelling format. The object is nice, but it's really the story behind the object.
And then you've also got this amazing project called the Permanent Record Project. You found a discarded file cabinet of old report cards, and you've been tracking all these people down.
Yeah, and I brought for you... To do my own show and tell, I brought some report cards for you to see, and I'm sure they look great on radio.
This is a report card
from what year?
They're mostly from the 20s and 30s, and I found them in a file cabinet that literally had a piece of paper taped to it that said "throw out." And what have
been the response of the people?
They're real. Oh man, she was a bad student.
Well, no, F means fair.
Oh,
not
okay.
Fail. You just assume the worst, don't you?
F plus. Just a lot of F pluses on this one.
They were all from a girls' vocational school called the Manhattan Trade School for Girls, which was actually the first vocational school for girls in the United States.
And are these women still alive?
I found only one living student. She's 95 years old and lives in Florida, and she doesn't quite understand why a reporter from New York is making such a fuss over her.
Please welcome Will Glass.
Hey, Will. Now, Will, you're a drummer that now there are a lot of comedians do impressions of other comedians. You do impressions of other drummers?
Exactly. So I will now impersonate Max Roach, Danny Richmond, Muriel Jones, Clyde Stubblefield, Ziggy Modaliste, Scott LaRock, and Jay Dilla.
In that order?
Precisely in that order, Andy. Tell me how my head looks afterwards.
Cesarean born, am I right?
As far as I know.
Now, you also have this brand new LP that you put out of breaks.
Yeah.
It's called Glass Breaks.
Yeah, it's unavoidable pun. My last name is Glass. It's available in stores next Tuesday. It's called Portrait of Seven More Drummers. It's also a minute long. Maybe I'll stretch it a little longer. Roy Haynes, Charlie Watts, Levon Helm, James Gadsden, Stevie Wonder, Milford Graves, and Madlib.
I should warn you, I've heard of 3 of those people. So I'll be able to judge this one.
Do you want more explanation? Would that be
No,
helpful?
no. We're groovy.
We're just going to leave it? Okay.